Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Liam Dann, New Zealand Herald Business Editor at Large. This is a podcast where we talk to New Zealanders about money and how it has shaped their lives. We're not going to tell you how to get rich. We're not going to pick the next interest rate move. But we are going to get you thinking about your relationship with money and what it really means to you. With me today I have Cameron Bagrie, founder of Bagrie Economics, former chief economist at ANZ, and well known for his commentary across numerous media organisations. Also a new business, Chaperon. That's right, Cameron?
Yep, Chaperon.
You're helping people with business loans, is that right?
Yeah, well, we're just about to launch, so we're in the final stages. Yeah, but if I have a look at what we got across New Zealand at the moment, we're pretty well overweight houses and we're underweight businesses. And we need to sort of restore a little bit of balance to that. And one of the big issues out there at the moment is accessing credit for a firm. You know, credit is the lifeblood of the economy. We need to see it pumping through our veins, and there's sort of faults on both sides. You know, obviously banks are being a little bit nervous given the economic environment, so it's pretty tough to extract it.
So I mean, you're in the thick of thinking about money all the time, right, in your job. This is, to kick this off, I'm sort of keen to go right back, and I ask guests on the show what their very first memory of money is. Do you recall when you first held it in your hand, or when you first thought about wanting to have some?
I can remember, because I was brought up, little old Alexandra right through in central Otago, which is a pretty fantastic place to be living if you're a young kid. Hot as hell in the summer, and oh Christ, it was cold in the winter. But I can remember from a very young age, you're driving tractors, you're helping sort of mum and dad around the house. We had an orchard. It was not what you would call a financial success. So I guess I got a little bit scarred by that in regard to it. Sort of tilted my approach to money and saving and investing and that sort of stuff from a
was that era of deregulation for the ag and horticulture sector? Did they cop that?
Yeah, deregulation. The old sort of story in the 1980s in regard to double-digit interest rates. The younger generation at the moment probably can't believe what things were like in the 1980s in regard to you pay what on your mortgage.
They're just waiting to get to a single digit.
Your loan on the business, but it was pretty tough. But most of the kids that are brought up with a little bit of rural heritage, you're out there and you're working from a pretty young age. And I was lucky enough that my mother insisted that I got paid. I was lucky enough to be an investor in the share market in the 1980s, and I thought I was king up until 1987, and then it was a bit of a reality check in regard to I thought I knew a lot. The reality was I was green and I didn't know a lot at all, and it was a big lesson.
So this was as a kid and early teens or something like that. I'm guessing your age here, to be honest, Cameron.
I was at high school in the 1980s. But I guess what really got me interested in money is probably the wrong sort of thing. I was always I had two things at school, sport and maths. So from a young age, I learnt the old school way in regard to maths. You memorise the times tables, and these sort of things. And I guess those sort of little things I think probably stood me in pretty good stead, through my life, and just the basics. Being able to do arithmetic in your head pretty damn quickly. It's quite horrifying now when you go into some of the sort of shops and you hand over a note and you see the person on the other side trying to sort of do the maths in regard to how much change to give you back.
So you could have obviously that investment stuff, working in a family business could have gone off in a more entrepreneurial way, but you were drawn into economics somehow or other. Was it just that subject appealed to you from?
I guess so. I probably, in all honesty, fell into it. So when I was at high school, I used to be fixated with the drawing designs of houses. And I always sort of thought I was going to be an architect. And I sort of, probably around, when seventh form at school, suddenly thought, no, I actually quite like this accounting gig. And because I was quite good at numbers, quite good at maths, so accounting was a natural thing. And I made the big call, which I think was a smart call, to go to Canterbury University. Canterbury University in the early 1990s was getting an awful lot of their graduate students into either the Reserve Bank or Treasury. And I was very fortunate in the mid 1990s to be offered a job at Treasury.
And so you came out of university, you get your first job in Treasury, which is a good break. Was a sort of a feeling of having a bit of money in your pocket at that point? Did you, when you had those first choices, often when you get your first job, you don't have the mortgage, family and kids, and you can spend a bit in your of your first paychecks?
Yeah, well, to be honest, the pay wasn't that great, but the job was, it was exciting. It was the place to be right back in the 1990s. Treasury was involved actively in a lot of stuff, and you're in your mid-20s as I was, and you're engaged in meetings with the Minister of Finance. You're sitting around the edges, not saying too much, but it's just to be in the presence of that sort of stuff was helplessly exciting. I did a lot of work in 1999, I think, from memory, on the compulsory super scheme that got overwhelmingly rejected by about 95% of the population. That was a great scheme.
We'd be a lot better off, right?
It just got torpedoed.
A few years later, we're looking at Australia going, how much have they got in their scheme?
It got torpedoed for political reasons, but that was great to be actually a part of that. At the moment, big theme out there at the moment is balance between the economic and the social side of the ledger. And if you don't have that balance, then you're going to have fundamental problems economically down the track. I'll give you a classic example at the moment, is that obviously, housing across New Zealand is a major problem. The biggest concern to 60% of New Zealanders compared to 22% of Australians. Now, if housing is not just enough, I think what's going on with housing is contributing to some of the things we're starting to see within the education sector, because we're seeing declining school attendance. And if we don't get housing right, then kids are getting bounced around from property to property. They're getting forced to shift, and school attendance becomes declining school attendance is not just because of housing, but I think it's a contributing factor. And if I sit and think about what's going to be, what's the biggest barometer we can look at today and make a judgment where New Zealand is going to be in 30 to 35 years, I'd argue it's the education sector. So everything's tied up in regard to where we're going to be down the track.
And you're okay to mention here that you're kind of involved with the Life Education Trust, and that was I might have this wrong. Gerald the Giraffe used to be
Harold
the Giraffe.
Harold the Giraffe.
Sorry, Harold.
It's been around since the early 1990s. And we got about 45 odd mobile classrooms whooping around the country, and they approached me a couple of years ago to come and sit on the board and present probably a little bit of a different view in regard to thinking a little bit. So I'm pretty big on the whole sort of disruption sort of thing, and encouraging organisations. You just not taking risk is no longer the risk-free strategy.
Right.
You've actually got to innovate. You got to try to keep ahead of the curve. Now I've also got to be in my bonnet about financial literacy, or as we call it nowadays, we call it money mojo, because financial literacy just goes over the head of the average sort of kid. It's not that sort of spicy term that you need to use with kids. So it's only small, but we launched last year, and we got disrupted ourselves with COVID. But we launched a program for year 10. You can't take Harold the Giraffe into year 10 into the high schools. And so that involved a little bit of rebranding. So Life Ed is the kitchen, and we've got multiple dining rooms, and Harold stays in one dining room. But now we've got a year 9 dining room, because we're out there talking about alcohol. Year 10, we've got something small that's involved in Money Mojo. The Reserve Bank actually stumped up with some money for that, which hat tip to the Reserve Bank, because they're starting to think about, the financial system is not just about where it is today, it's 30 years down the track. Who are going to be the guardians of the financial system 30 years down the track? It's the kids of today. So the Reserve Bank is starting to think about, what could we do in that space? And we didn't want to go away and create another website, because everybody's creating a website, and everybody looks like they're stepping on each other's toes. So we engaged some actors, and our teaching mechanism was theatre sports.
Right. Knowing a lot about money in theory, a lot about economics in theory, you are in business now as well. But do you apply the sort of what we'd probably consider the appropriate, all the correct? Are you good at the personal finance rules and sticking to them yourself in terms of how you approach risk and debt and those things?
Oh, yeah, I've had different attitudes to risk at, different times in my life.
That's probably the goal, isn't it? To adjust, to have your risk attitude and balanced with where you're at.
Yeah, earlier on, because I'd the experience I've sort of seen in regard to basically family losing it all. You sort of think, well, right, I'm going to get a bit back, and I was pretty risk averse for a number of years until I sort of got to a certain level, and that money sort of gets parked now because that's basically my kids.
Yep.
I want to make sure that my kids are secure down the track, and once I sort of hit this this number that I knew, right, the kids are going to be well looked after and the grandkids are going to be well looked after, well, the old sort of risk curve is sort of like we're now off to the races.
Yeah.
But it's not sort of it's not unfettered risk. This is where there's principles of business, but it's also respecting the laws of economics.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of a bit of stuff at the moment in the property market. Got no interest in Auckland. I think Auckland's going to end up overbuilding in the next 12 months. I've still got interest in the regions because I think that's where the real housing shortages are. So the business stuff, that's about executing in regard to what I'm doing. But the economics sort of helps guide me in regard to, well, what are you actually looking at? When I was in my 20s, I come out of university, no kids. I had a leveraged equities account, you name it. I was out there in my 20s and I was punting.
Yeah.
Right. I was pretty risk seeking around those early sort of days. Then you get kids, and I just flipped.
Yeah.
I went really conservative in regard to what my approach was, apart from a couple of housing related things, and now the risk curve is gone up, and part of that is it's fun, and when you get I shouldn't disclose this, but when you get with a 5 in front of you, sort of your age, I think you start to think about things through a little bit of a different lens, so I try to give back a fair bit, but now 1 day a week, free speaking events, that sort of stuff. Anything to do with kids is just free. Yep. Speaking events with adults, well, sorry, you're going to pay. Some people don't like to pay, but sorry, you have to. But life's too short. You got to get something out of it. And it's not just about the money.
Is there something that stands out to you as the key problem in terms of, particularly in New Zealand, we've got intergenerational poverty, and what jumps out is the issue that is keeping people stuck there, I guess.
There is no one issue.
Yeah.
And I guess that's probably the most important thing, is that don't think about this, that there is a magic bullet.
Yeah.
There is no magic bullet. There is a very deep web of overlapping issues here that we need to be attacking from multiple sides. If you look at where we're seeing the biggest decline in school attendance, it's in primary schools.
Yeah.
Maori Pacifica regular school attendance, 45% of Maori Pacifica kids are regularly attending school. Now, regular attendance is 9 days in 10, so it's not like half the kids are not turning up, every day. Most of them are turning up every day, but that's still a hell of a big non-attendance, coming through that block. If you look at where Maori Pacifica are within the unemployment statistics, they're overrepresented. It was really nice to see Adrian Orr in the Reserve Bank put a box in the monetary policy statement in February, looking at the Maori economy, and basically the big message in this was that there's only so much we can do with our magical sort of wand interest rates and getting the economy sort of up here, and they said we're just about at full employment. That we're just about at full employment, and we've still got 200,000 people on the job seeker benefit and 370,000 people in benefits overall. Now, that's 1 in 9 people of working age. That tells you we've got very deep-rooted structural problems. We want to alleviate poverty. Well, the best way to go about it is getting people back into paid work. Decent jobs, your living wage, fair wage. But it can't just be about just paying people willy-nilly. You've got to make them more productive. I think we've underinvested in people for a long time. housing is exacerbating a lot of the problems we're seeing on the street at the moment. I think we've got a fundamental problem across, short-termism has been rife. It's been a plague. Now the long game is in and the short game is out. What does that mean? Well, government thinking about infrastructure through a long lens, so we can get this building developments up off the ground. Thinking about, I was a big fan of Bill English with what he was doing with his investment approach, but particularly the use of data, right? So you can be a lot more surgical, which is going to improve your chance of success. So there's a whole lot of things that could take down, looked at, how much money you can make in peripheral income if you're on a benefit before your benefit gets abated. There's all these sort of things that we need to get stuck into. But I go back to the thing that really rubs me up at the moment is what we're seeing in schools. Yeah. And there's a whole lot of complex issues there. And for some reason, it's like we don't want to talk about it too much. Yeah. It's amazing that it doesn't get more airtime. I noticed, they sort of worked out, the declining trend for mathematics and science is becoming a little bit of an issue. So lo and behold, there's some sort of group off there that's now looking at that. And I sit back, for God's sake, the Ministry of Education told us in 2019 declining school attendance is now looking like a systemic trend. Yeah,
so that's sort of beneath everything else before you get to whichever subject. If you're not there, you're not learning.
We've known about this stuff for a long time, and we're in an era. Well, we've been in an era. This is our generation, our parents' generation, where for 30 years interest rates have gone lower and lower, and that's driven asset prices higher and higher, which has created a lot of wealth. It's created a lot of jobs, a lot of spending, a lot of security for some portions of the population. What it's also done is it's exacerbated income inequality, and we've now got an affordability problem, which is it's an outright crisis, to be honest. But we're transitioning at the moment away from an era where monetary policy rules, because that trend has come to an end. Even if interest rates do not go up for a long time, the fact that they're no longer going down changes the equation on housing and how we think about investing fundamentally. I think we're entering an era where government is going to have to step up. Governments are going to get bigger. They're going to get a lot more interventionist. They're going to be a lot more active, and they're going to look at, they need to rebalance that economic and social side of the ledger. Now, that's going to present challenges, but it also presents opportunities. To get that balance coming back in. So I don't like the wellbeing approach. I just think, look, it's too complicated. Keep it simple. It's about the long game, not about the short game. And if you're going to talk about the long game government, you've got to embrace all the challenges, including New Zealand superannuation. But the government, working in government circles for the next 10 years could be helplessly exciting. We need, we're going to face higher taxes. I have no problem paying more tax if we're going to get quality spend and actual outcomes on the other side.
So there's a focus on competent delivery, I guess, as opposed to the ideological battles that we've been sort of fighting for 30 years.
Absolutely.
You must have got caught up. As an economist, you can't talk about economics for long before you end up getting drawn into the politics of it. But even in what you've just said there, you've touched on things on both sides of political fence. It doesn't seem like you feel particularly bound by the old school left right dynamic.
I think a lot of those sort of extremes are not useful. I use the sort of phrase to describe there's people out there that say, well, we just need to let the market prevail. Basic economics. I said, well, sorry, the market doesn't work. It's like having no referee on a rugby game, and we know the players will cheat. It's like, there's a reason we have umpires and we have snickometer, whatever it is, for crickets, because we know the cricketers will not walk. So you need a referee, right? But there's a big difference between a good referee and a not so good referee in regard to how the game's actually played. And what we're seeing at the moment, look, once again, fundamentally different environment for the next sort of 30 years. Bigger government, more active. That's going to be an outcome, but we're going to need more checks and balances on this. We're going to need that independent fiscal institution that Grant Robertson talked about to be put in place to make sure that the assumptions and numbers that they're using are verifiable. We need organisations such as Treasury and MB, that they need to step up in regard to the policy advice that they're delivering. We need real quality people to be surrounding those politicians to make sure they're getting the best possible advice.
Sure, because when people of, say, you and my generation and older hear big government, we immediately panic and start to think of the late 70s and the tax and spend with no real accountability,
Exactly.
pulling economic levers that were doing all sorts of weird things. So I guess it's got to be not a step back into something that we've been through. It's got to be a new way of doing it, surely.
Yeah, look, we do not know what the optimal level of spending or taxes is. So we can't actually say at the moment, have we got things about right in regard to the economy, in regard to spending about this amount or taxing about this amount, because the numbers used to get thrown around, expenses around 30% of GDP. Well, there was nothing magical about 30% of GDP, just like there was nothing magical about net debt needed to be 20% of GDP. Yeah. It was just a number that was, I think, made up because it sounded about right, and it sort of implied a little bit of self-control. Yeah. What we need to be doing, we need to be getting into debates and just thinking about, for every dollar you spend over here, that's a dollar you could spend over here. It's choices that we are making. I don't have a problem paying more tax if I could be assured there are going to be deliverable outcomes on the other side. At the moment, I'm not convinced about the deliverable outcomes on the other side. I think we've got some great aspirations in regard to where New Zealand needs to go. A for aspiration, the execution component is a real big issue, and I don't think people are realising the significance of this pivot, this inflection point where we're at, because I think that this is going to be a defining trend for a long time. Where you have a look at the expectations we're seeing out of the United States towards Joe Biden. What's going on there in regard to the company tax rate, pressure on company tax rates around the globe. Talking about universal sort of rates so we don't sort of undercut each other. These are small things, but they're signalling inflection points and fundamentally different ways of thinking because society's rattled. We just let that ledger become far too disconnected.
The pandemic seems to, people talk about the pandemic accelerating tech change. It does seem to have accelerated this sort of shift in economic thinking as well. I guess because in a crisis, you like a pandemic, you need a government to act. So there's it feels a bit like the big pillars of that kind of neoliberal orthodoxy of all sort of crumbled a bit. Trump gave free trade a kicking. Then you've got monetary policy's gone very unorthodox, and now with Biden and even the Tories in the UK are putting up corporate tax, it seems the fiscal policy is looking pretty different too. So
and we've got an environment here where we haven't really got the exit strategy. In regard to what that is going to look like. Now, ultimately, I think the exit strategy is going to involve inflation turning up like we haven't seen for a very long time. Now, central banks say, well, we've got the tools to handle that. Well, yes, you might have the tools, but are you prepared to utilise that and do what could need to be done? Because that will involve a pretty stark economic adjustment if inflation does turn up at the door. And I'm not saying it's around the corner, but I'll tell you what, the cost push pressures I'm seeing across New Zealand at the moment, I've not seen in 30 years. So it might be a couple of suburbs away. And then you start to think about your central banks are independent, but that independence resides at the luxury of the government of the day. And ballooning government debt and rising interest rates is not going to be a great combination, 10 years down the track. But these are not near-term things that are going to take place immediately. But we are, at some stage, the piper is going to be paid for the choices that we've made in the last 12 months or past few years. The strategy last year of going big, being bold, it was the right strategy. But now we need to start to think a little bit more beyond sort of recovery, because we've actually bounced the economy back up to pretty close to pre-COVID levels. In fact, we're higher if you strip out tourism. We've done incredibly well. But supply side is the biggest issue for New Zealand.
Yeah.
What can the government do to tweak supply settings to help businesses out? Obvious one here is RSE workers.
Yeah.
Come on, we can go to Australia. We might have a Cook Islands bubble sort of pending. Why on earth can't we get more workers in to meet the demand as opposed to leave that fruit rotting on the trees? There's all these small things that need to get done, but we need to be starting to think about the medium-term story. We can't. Monetary policy is yesterday's story. I just don't think the government or people have woken up to the reality of the scale of where we are moving into.
And just to bring it back finally and wrap it up, I guess, to that sort of personal, but that discussion about risk, because when people talk about personal finance and things, it just seems to me that is fairly fundamental to some people talk about the sleep at night test, having your financial world set up to match your personal risk appetite. If you don't have much risk appetite, don't torture yourself. I mean, is that how you'd look at it?
Yeah, look, I'm not a qualified financial advisor, so I can't provide.
I do like to say that this podcast is not just if the FMA's listening. This is
but you hit the nail on the head there. That sometimes once you keep it simple, sport, KISS applies. The sleep test is a pretty good one. Nothing's guaranteed out there, but if something's keeping you awake at night, would you not be better off to do something about it so then you get a better night's sleep?
Yeah,
it's good. It's basic risk management.
Hey, that's great, Cam. We'll leave it there. But so thanks so much for chatting, and good luck with the new business. Good luck with the Life Education Trust, and hopefully for all of us with the New Zealand economy. Cheers.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. If you've got feedback, drop me a line, liam.dan@nzherald.co.nz. And if you want to hear more of these, please subscribe at iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.